Welcome to Alberta Conservation Association's Harvest Your Own podcast, the resource for everything hunting, navigating through the field, the butcher shop, and the kitchen. Life is all about great food. Let's get started.
Welcome to the podcast. I'm your host, Brad Fenson, an avid outdoor enthusiast who has worked as a freelance journalist, photographer, and public speaker for over 3 decades. I have hunted, fished, and foraged all my life and hope to share my passion for the outdoors. Along the way, I want to encourage everyone to harvest wild proteins and enjoy the satisfaction of providing the next meal for your family. Our goal is to educate, entertain, and inspire individuals to get outdoors and create a connection between food, health, and your future meals. Welcome to Harvest Your Own. Today we're going to discuss access. It seems to be one of the things that really holds people back. They get intimidated. I've seen some people actually shaking so bad I thought they're going to get sick having to go knock on the door. But we have lots of access opportunities here in Alberta. So today I have a couple guests, Todd Zimmerling and Roy Schmaltzheisen. Both gents are with Alberta Conservation Association. Todd, President CEO, and Roy works as a senior biologist in the lands program. So, ACA, what is the connection with hunters? Why should hunters know about ACA?
Well, basically, hunters should know about ACA because the vast majority of the money you spend on a hunting tag comes to us. So, we're spending your money as a stakeholder on a year-to-year basis, and as a result, you should be having a look at how we're spending it. We need to hear that what we're doing is what you want it to spend on, and if we're not doing what you're hoping to be spent on, then we'd like to hear that and find out what stakeholders do want. On top of that, obviously, we're doing all kinds of projects that are hopefully benefiting hunters and anglers out there. And, of course, we're going to talk about access today and the lands that Roy and his colleagues look at purchasing on a year-over-year basis, provide that. But we also do a number of different wildlife studies related to hunting activities. We do the pheasant release program, of course, that runs across the province every year, providing all kinds of hunting opportunities. All kinds of promotion of hunting, why hunting is important to society as a whole, trying to dispel some myths, trying to help get people involved and interested in becoming hunters. We started the Harvest Your Own website a couple years ago and have really pushed that out to try to get people looking at wild game meat as a protein source. So if you're interested in field to fork, it doesn't get much more field to fork than you going out and shooting it in a field and bringing it back to your own fork. So all kinds of reasons for hunters to be interested in who ACA is and what we do.
I think that's an important message. I think sometimes people like us take it for granted that hunters have that assimilation with ACA, what it is, where their dollars go from their hunting license fees. Those levies are working for hunters, for the future, for wildlife, for the resources, to continue hunting. All of those programs are funded with hunter and angler dollars.
Absolutely, yeah. And like I say, they're the key stakeholder, and we need to hear one way or the other how things are going, or their ideas, their concerns, and we can see how we can incorporate that into the type of stuff we do.
Well, a good example of that is the recent landowner access survey that you did.
Yeah. I think as every hunter knows, that's top of mind all the time is getting access. And, we attend a lot of meetings, Roy and myself and a bunch of other folks go to meetings all the time. And the first thing we always hear is access is an issue. But, of course, when you ask that first question, okay, well, who has the data, how big an issue is? Well, my friend went over to this place and he asked and, he was told he couldn't. And then I heard about another guy. And so no one actually has any real data. It's just a bunch of, stories they've been told and personal experiences. But we didn't have any information as to how big a problem is it? Where is it? What is the actual issue? So we actually undertook a survey this past year, I guess it would have been, of both the hunters and landowners out there to get an idea of how big an issue do we really have, what is the issue, and do hunters and landowners have the same opinion as how big an issue it is. So it's been quite interesting.
Right, the two different perspectives. It'll be interesting to see where they overlap and where the differences really are, because the information that we got back from landowners was, for me, it was very interesting. Basically, what it says is if you know somebody that's a friend or family, it's a lot easier to get access. If not, you really have to work at it a little bit.
Yeah, and as you would expect, right? If you know somebody, well, I guess it depends on your friends and family, but presumably you're friends with somebody because you like them, and therefore you'd be willing to let them on your land. Family sometimes is a little bit a different case, but you're forced to have to like them and let them on your land. But you can understand why friends and family would end up, having first dibs on lands and it being easier to get access if you know somebody. But even if you don't have friends or family that have land. Certainly, lots of people have success getting access, and a lot of it, if you take a look at the survey, it depends on what type of access you're asking for. And we had it broken down as to foot access versus truck access versus e-bike access, which is something that jumped out at me. It was quite interesting that allowing for access by bike ranked much higher than allowing for access by e-bikes. So landowners have something against e-bikes at this point in time. I don't know if it's the bikes or the people who use them, but it's very interesting to look at some of those results that came back out of the survey.
There were other interesting results that are promising. There's actually landowners that say they could handle more hunters on their property, that they just don't get enough people knocking on their doors.
Yeah, I think that was extremely interesting, and of course, at this point, we haven't sort of put out a map saying, "Oh, here's the landowners that did that," because I'm sure they'll have lots of people knocking on the doors by the time the fall comes. But yeah, it's clear that not everybody is saying, "Oh, I've got too many hunters." Certainly, there are a good number saying, the number's just right, or I've got too many people, and of course. We also have to keep in mind the last couple of years during COVID, we had a huge bump in the number of people who were out in the fall looking for access there. So there certainly was increased pressure on a lot of landowners. But I think the real story that I get out of it is landowners in general are willing to allow for access, but there'll be specific instances where what makes a certain landowner say yes or no. That you'll just have to find out. You have to get out there and get to know them. And it was also clear the more they know somebody, the more they're willing to allow them access, which is just human nature.
Yeah, I think that all makes sense. There are some other highlights in that survey that stood out to me. 78% of respondents value habitat. Like, that's great news for hunters, that landowners actually understand what habitat is, that's what creates the wildlife that's often some of them refer to as their nemesis. But they actually want it there.
Yeah, and it's, actually a really good result, obviously, for us to see that. It's not, we don't have to start a program, to try to convince landowners it's important to keep habitat. They're already on board, which, you would expect. That's, it's a big part of their life. All these landowners, there's a reason they're on the land, the reason they're ranchers and farmers. So it was good to see that shows up in the survey for sure. Yeah, we've clearly, right there, hunters and landowners have something in common right from the very beginning. So that could be your starting point getting in the door in the first place.
Exactly. Now, phase 2 of the study will be out early fall, where we have information from hunters.
Well, given that I'm not the one that has to write the report, I will say yes, it will be out early fall. We have some of our people working on it right now, running the numbers, and what we're really trying to do as well is do that cross check between what did we hear from landowners, what did we hear from the hunters, what matches up, and what are we seeing a big disparity where, hunters said it was an issue and landowners said, no, it's not an issue. Clearly that becomes a major problem if we could identify those kinds of things. So, we do expect to have a more comprehensive sort of look at the overall picture by later this year in the fall. Yep.
Yeah, so access can be quite convoluted, confusing, different perspectives from landowners, hunters, just how we all approach things differently. One of the most listened to episodes that we had was Linda Zimmerling on here talking about how to gain access, like using a landowner map, knocking on the door, shaking people's hands, getting to know them, getting their phone number, doing follow-up. So this is sort of taking things to the next stage, but we're also going to talk about some programs where hunters that really don't have the nerve to go knock on somebody's door are not limited in terms of access to great properties where they can hunt province-wide. So, one of the other Alberta Conservation Association programs is the Discover Guide. And for hunters and anglers and gatherers and outdoor recreationists that don't know about it, it's a great tool for finding a place wherever you are in the province to go recreate.
This podcast is produced for Harvest Your Own, a program dedicated to those who want to reconnect with food and health through their experiences outdoors. HarvestYourOwn.ca is a resource for individuals to learn more about hunting and the outdoors. There's information to get you started and ensure that your compass stays pointed in the right direction to be successful. Where's your next meal coming from?
I'll let Roy take this one because he puts a lot of his blood, sweat, and tears into developing it every year. So,
yeah, thanks, Todd. We have over almost 800 sites that we advertise in the Discover Guide, and they're managed for their habitat value and also for the recreational opportunities they provide. We have fish access sites, aerated lakes, and many sites for hunting on in the Discover Guide.
There's over 800 sites now. That's a number of different organizations that allow their information to be used there. Maybe just talk about the different partners within the conservation community and what we're looking at in terms of land mass.
Right. The number of acres it's about around 300,000 acres of land that's advertised, and the partners include a lot of the sites are, of course, Alberta Conservation Associations. Alberta Fish and Game Association has a number of their sites on, Ducks Unlimited Canada, and then there's also other sites from counties and a lot of crown lands as well that are advertised in this guide.
You know, it's interesting because you look at the numbers and the acreage that's out there for the hunters that we have. For instance, we have about 17,000 waterfowl hunters in Alberta, and there's 300,000 acres. And I would venture to guess that there's the majority of the projects that are listed have some type of wetland features and waterfowl value. So the opportunity alone for people to get out there is huge, especially if you don't want to knock on the door. So the Discover Guide makes it easy to find these properties. What do people need to do to access them?
Right, yeah. So they are open access, so you don't need permission to access the sites. They are foot access only, though. That's one restriction on them. And there's no camping or fires permitted on the sites. But definitely, if a person wants to go out on a weekend or any particular day to enjoy a site, they can go out. I would just suggest double checking the restrictions on the site, because there are a few sites that have specific restrictions that are outside the norm, such as phoning a contact, or a few of them don't permit hunting.
Yeah, there are a few, but there's a couple unique instances too where you can phone in and book a property where they only allow so many people on in a day, and you're assured a quality experience when you're out there. So, some of the prairie habitats, for instance, there's some parcels down there where you can phone in and book a spot if you've got a mule deer tag or want to try bow hunting or whitetails or even upland game birds. There's lots of opportunity to do it.
Yeah, correct.
Now, the Discover Guide, obviously the name is get out there and discover the outdoors, the wildlife, whatever it is you want to pursue. How do people access the Discover Guide?
So I guess a couple of main ways is, one, every year in January we put out a printed copy of the Discover Guide, and you can find it in a number of locations. We also have an app that can be downloaded. It's a free app. I should say the Discover Guide, printed Discover Guide, is also a free material. And you could also, to find sites, you can go to our website and look there. Those are main.
Yeah, if you Google search Alberta Conservation Association, it'll come up, and then there's a tab for Discover Guide where you can open it up, and it'll tell you about the program, how it started, the partners that are involved, the acreage, how many properties, and you can sort of look things up from there. You can also order a printed version off your website.
Correct.
Yeah. Correct. So, and then most of the sporting goods stores that carry any type of hunting or fishing equipment also have the Discover Guide that you could pick up on the counter.
Yeah.
One of the great things I like about the app and online is you can basically ask it to tell you what's close to me. And even if you just happen to be driving around one afternoon and say, hey, let's go for a hike someplace, you can go onto the app and ask it to tell you what's close to me for conservation sites, and it pops up.
that is an absolutely great tool. And, the app is a free download. It has all the information in there. It's got, you can even get directions to a property from where you're at.
Yep.
So as Todd mentioned, you can search the app for conservation properties within 10 kilometers. You could fine tune it and say, tell me the properties that are within 100 kilometers that have some type of fishing. So, for the trout ponds and things like that, it's a great tool to find a place. You're going to visit someone out in the country in some corner of Alberta, you can always use the app and find out what else you can do while you're out there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been, and basically, I think when we try to develop the app and the online version, we were trying to think of what if I'm a hunter and angler, what processes am I going to want on this app? What functionality in order to make it useful for me? So it's people like myself tested it, so it's pretty well dummy proof at this point. So we've tried to make sure how could it be broken by somebody who doesn't know how to use apps. So it works pretty well. Yeah.
Well, one nice thing too with the app is you can also sign up for an account and you can choose your favorite. So if you particularly like certain sites, you can put them as your favorites and have a list of those.
Yeah, very interesting. I also with the app, there's also the iHunter Alberta, and they have all the conservation sites on it as well.
Yeah. So we've shared the database that Roy manages with iHunter. So if you download the iHunter app, it will show up on there as well as the Alberta Conservation Association sites. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's just an important detail because some people are always nervous. They're like, "Is this the right property? I don't want to get I don't want to be trespassing. I want to make sure I'm at the right spot." If you're using the app and you get directions, it'll lead you to the property. But if you're looking for boundaries, you can use other apps like iHunter to help show that the boundary of the property.
Yeah, and to be clear on the sites that are owned by Alberta Conservation Association or managed directly by Alberta Conservation Association, Roy and his colleagues spend a good amount of their life putting up signage. You should not have problem finding an ACA site. I find personally when I go to DU sites, and there's many of those in the site, some of them might not be as well signed, but there's generally several right at the entrance that you can find as well. So if you're still concerned, even with all the electronics, you can still use the good old sign on the signpost to see whether or not it is the site.
Yes, basically you're managing for all generations of hunters.
Yes, absolutely.
We also provide the quarter section information if you want to go the old county map method of looking at it. So.
Well, and that's important because a lot of people, that's the only way they still know how to access things in the country. They use a map. Not everyone wants to use an app. That's why we have a printed guide. You can go on the web. It's well thought out in terms of helping anyone and everyone, no matter what your technological level's at. Yeah.
And you mentioned it earlier, but the sites have every opportunity for hunting. So no matter what it is you want to hunt, whether it's grouse or waterfowl or antelope, there are sites within the guide that provide those hunting opportunities. So it's just a matter of sort of picking the area you want to hunt, and you can go through and find a site in that particular area that will have those opportunities for you.
Yeah, and the app and the guide is developed for ease of use. Roy, maybe you could explain how it's broken up into zones.
Yeah, right. So the grid, there's a grid system, which basically breaks it down. We took Alberta and we split it into a grid. Basically allows a person to zoom into a particular area and look around for sites in that area. The grids are, they have a letter and a number associated with them. So B2, for example, would be around high level, whereas F4 is, if you're in Medicine Hat, you would be looking at F4. And so once you get into that section, if you're looking at the printed guide, you can, if you want to look at, say, at F4, you would go to that. There's different sections in the Discover Guide broken up by those grid numbers. You go to that section, and each of the site has a number associated with it. So you would just find the area that you want to hunt and see what number is there, and go to look up that number, and it'll tell you the name of the site and a bunch of details about the site.
What other details do they provide? Like, it's all useful information that people can make an informed decision to go to a specific property and look for grouse or deer or waterfowl or berries or mushrooms.
Yeah, on the top, there's the name, and next to it, there's icons. The basic icons being whether you're hunting, fishing, or hiking, other opportunities. So if it'll either be, if it's green, it's good. If it's X'd off, then that means that opportunity is not on that site. And then the next, the first section is the site details. It gets a little bit in how to get to the site, and how big the site is, and maybe a couple feature comments on the site. There'll be restrictions, which generally will state day use only, no open fires, and foot access only. And that's pretty standard for our sites. If there's any specific restrictions, that's where it'll say for that site, this specific restriction there. Then we have a list of our partners, anybody who's contributed with the site, and of course the quarter section information.
This podcast was made possible by Alberta Conservation Association and the Harvest Your Own community. If you're interested in harvesting your own food, there's a comprehensive collection of information to gain insight and knowledge. Head to the field, harvest your own protein, prepare it, and taste the results. HarvestYourOwn.ca is a library of information from getting started and geared up to processing, butchering, and cooking wild game to make the connection between health and food.
Yeah, I'm always amazed at how many sites are within just equated to a wildlife management unit. Hunters know what wildlife management units are because they apply for specific draws in a WMU for moose or elk or deer or different things. But, getting ready for the draws this year, I opened that app and I was looking at specific WMUs and clicking on it and saying, whoa, there's 18 conservation sites there. Like, that's somewhere I can go and just go hunting. And then I started to dig in and I'm like, all right, this one says it's got moose and this one has moose and this one has moose. I'm like, I think this would be a great place to apply for my moose tag this year. So there's a lot of different ways to use the information, and it's laid out so that it's easy to access. The grid system, if you're going to Hannah, you can look it up and cross-reference it and say, okay, I'm going to look in this grid and see what sites are there. If you're going east of Edmonton or southwest of Calgary, same thing. You can hone in on the specific sites that are there and then look at the details, not only the habitat, but the species that are often available on those sites.
Right. Yeah, and if I'm looking to hunt an area, I usually go to the guide first and see what sites are there.
Which is why we're talking about it. I don't know if everyone has the Discover Guide, but I certainly keep a printed copy in my truck, and I also have the app on my phone that I use regularly. And it's a great way to cross-reference. Often when we plan family visits, I know I'm not going to want to sit around watching TV somewhere, so I often look at the Discover Guide and see what's in a neighborhood. Last time I was down in Medicine Hat, I explored 5 different properties. We actually hunted some pheasants and sharp-tailed grouse and different things and had a great time. But without that Discover Guide, I would have never known some of those were there. So great opportunities.
And there's also other opportunities such as like foraging. You can pick mushrooms or berries or anything like that's allowed on these sites, which you might not be able to do in like a parks site.
Yeah, there's a couple other really important messages to get across here. Some of these sites are fantastic habitat. Like, that's why they were secured through the conservation community. So the habitat features that are there are what attract the wildlife and make them so valuable for conservation, but it also makes them very attractive and productive for hunting. So I don't know if you've got any favorite sites, Todd, or, I know we've both been out at Golden Ranches. It's one of the largest private land holdings within the county of Strathcona. It's close to the city. It's got all kinds of opportunity. It gets lots of day use, but there's always critters there.
Yeah, I mean, Golden Ranches is a great property, no doubt about it. Yeah, my son harvested his first cow moose out there, and shot a couple deer out there, so it's been great. But I would say probably my favorite site is probably the Escape Coulee down in southern Alberta. It's grassland area, and I'm not used to hunting in grassland from being up around Edmonton. So anytime I go down there, I really enjoy going to that site. It's a beautiful coulee that runs out into the Milk River Valley, and I see nice mule deer there every single time. I've yet to even come close to being able to shoot one with a bow, but I get to see them every single time, and that in itself is kind of fun.
So anyone listening, I'm like, shootable mule deer on a place where everybody has access? Are you kidding?
Yeah. Well, and maybe that's why I'm not having luck, because lots of other people go there. They see me and they bolt. But yeah, I mean, the deer are there, and even though there's lots of access for everybody, the animals are still around these sites. And I think, like you said, a lot of it has to do with it's high quality habitat. And I mean, obviously, if you're the 10th guy that day walking the same site, you might not see the same number of deer. But the truth is, most of these sites don't get a heck of a lot of use. Certainly, like we said, Golden Ranches being right here in Strathcona County, hunting season comes, you'll see people out there every single day. But a lot of our sites, they're relatively low use because there's so many of them and they're spread out all around the province. So it's certainly something that people shouldn't turn the nose up at, the idea that this is basically a public site that anybody can go to. There's still plenty of opportunities for people to harvest nice animals. Well, my wife, as you know, harvested a monster whitetail on a conservation site just 3 or 4 years ago here. So
bigger than anything I've ever shot.
Yeah, well, exactly, right? And, it was something that, anybody could walk onto. We just happened to get lucky.
Yeah, and, there's lots of information on Harvest Your Own about how to get game out. If you're hunting on foot on a property and you need some help, don't get overwhelmed. Look into it. You're talking from experience. You've brought out lots of moose and deer on sleighs, on game carts and backpacks, and it's very rewarding in its own way. Yeah,
my wife has shot a lot of big animals, so I've hauled out a lot of animals out of the bush. Yeah, it's been awesome. Yeah.
So there's lots of ways to do it. I want to work on the habitat on these sites a little bit more. Roy, what's your favorite site? I mean, you work in the conservation field. This is a big part of your job. You manage lands all over northeastern Alberta. Do you have a favorite site?
Yeah, I feel I have a number of favorite sites, but the North Fawcett and Flatbush sites, I'll just combine it.
Right.
They are a cluster of sites up by Fawcett and Flatbush, and they're wonderful sites, and we've done some restoration projects on them as well. They're next to large areas of provincial land too, near the river. So they're very nice sites to go out and enjoy.
Yeah, and again, don't be intimidated. It's foot access. I've hunted several of the sites in November in the prime of the rut and not come across any other boot prints. You would think these places would be crawling with hunters, but some drive by the edges. But if you like to hunt and get out and do a little bit of walking, there's lots to explore.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head right there. There's a lot of people who prefer to hunt, let's say, from the vehicle instead of getting out. If you want to get out and walk, there's no lack of great spots to get in there and, not bump into anybody else. I just wanted to mention the sites that Roy mentioned. Those sites were purchased with funds from Suncor Energy, and then they've been restored with funds from So the sites that we're talking about, they've been purchased with a wide range of partners, and I would really encourage people, when you pick up that Discover Guide, have a look at the different partners. So there's some impressive corporate partners that have put up money. Of course, individuals have provided funds, and of course also other conservation groups have partnered with us. So it's been the Discover Guide, I think, is a real good example of how much can be accomplished when everybody sort of pulls together for the same common goal of trying to conserve habitat.
Absolutely, and it's it is a huge accomplishment. Alberta has a history of working together. The different groups have put differences aside, looked for things that would be common objectives, and then work towards those goals. And because of that, we have seen many successes. Golden Ranches is a prime example.
Absolutely.
There isn't one group that could have purchased that on their own, but multiple groups working together were able to secure it. I also wanted to mention the Pomerank property, which is a very interesting site. It was willed to us by a fellow that managed it his whole life. Conservation and horticulture was his passion. And if you go there, you could probably pick some plums and some apples and a number of different berries and find all kinds of different things. But, it's an interesting site. Everything from deer, moose, elk, bears, everything else that's there. But there's an important message there. Other people that are listening that might have properties that have conservation value and sentimental value that have been managed generation after generation for their productive features for wildlife, there are opportunities to work with conservation communities to donate those properties. And, you know, it was a great gift from people. There's several donations that have come through, and now all Albertans can go out and enjoy those.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That Palmer property is the property I was stalked by a lynx last year while I was waiting to try and shoot a whitetail. I've never had a lynx walk within like 5 feet of me before I got to the point where I got nervous enough I had to stand up out of my chair and sort of look him in the eye to see, did he understand what I was? And he didn't run away. That was the concern. He sort of just slowly walked away like, you know, cats do, still giving you the eye. Well, it was a big cat walking away, so...
You know, there's a great message in there. Get out of the truck, walk 100 yards into the trees, and it's amazing what you'll see.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yep. It's lots to discover, lots to experience, lots to see, lots to do. There's one other site that I'd like to get a little more information on just to show the diversity of the habitats and the programs that Alberta Conservation Association is working on. Tell me about the True North Model Forest.
So the True North Forest was something that came about quite a few years ago in a partnership with Shell, and they basically wanted to do something for their, I'm trying to think, their 100-year anniversary. Roy, do you remember? Yeah, I think that's what it was.
I think so.
100 years in Canada, and so they wanted to do something special, and so they approached ACA, and Roy and his colleagues in the land team had worked with them in the past and some other purchases, but they came to us with basically an ask: can we find a significant chunk of habitat in the boreal forest area that they might be able to help us purchase and set aside for the long term? And we were able to work with a landowner up basically in Spirit River area who was interested. He had approached us and talked about potentially selling his property, and we were able to make a deal there where he sold a portion and he donated a portion, and Shell stepped up with the funding to allow us to do that. And now I can't even remember how many quarters it is now. It's got to be...
I think it's about three sections.
Yeah, I think you're right. That's what I was going to say, 10 or 11, yeah. So, and then on top of that, we were fortunate enough that... at some point in history, there was I think the highways had used a portion of that land as a gravel pit, so they made a pond. And so we were able to also create a fishery there as well. Last I heard, we have brook trout, I believe, stocked in the pond on this forest. And it's a great piece of property. I've been out there many times with my family. Lots of elk running around on the property itself. Moose, whitetail, mule deer, everything. You can go out there one morning, sit there, and you could see everything possible walking past.
Yeah, and that's, again, trying to reiterate to the listeners, there are properties out there, like 3 sections is 12 quarters minimum. You can find rough grouse. You can stop and fish during the day. There's elk there. And just because there's public access doesn't mean that all 12 of those quarters are ever going to be used by people in the same day, the same week, or even the same month. So there's a ton of opportunity. That's one project out of 800. And, we should talk a little bit about the prairie too. There's some very valuable sites that have been secured in Alberta for conservation reasons, and native prairie is one of them, but the species that it helps is a big part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. We've been doing a lot of work down, especially in southeast Alberta, on species at risk. And I think that's something that maybe the average hunter should be aware of, that we're receiving funds from the federal government to purchase properties and habitat on behalf of species at risk. But obviously, if you purchase a section of land with a coulee system in it, you're going to find mule deer in it as well. So we've certainly used the species at risk program to work on buying property that helps species at risk, but it is also benefiting those huntable species as well. So it's been really great, and we've got numerous great properties down in southern Alberta.
Absolutely. It really stresses the biodiversity. If you have the stuff for the threatened and endangered species and some that we don't even pay attention to or see, the habitat's usually good for the species that we'll call the consumptive users like to find as well.
Yep.
So those southern properties are quite unique, and no matter where you are in Alberta, take your time to look up some conservation sites and go and visit them. Roy, how do they find the app?
It's under Discover Guide, I believe, in the App Store. Whatever device you use, go to your App Store and look up Discover Guide in there. And
yes, it's good for Apple users. And what's the other one?
The good one, the Android users. Yes.
Yeah, I knew you'd answer that with
Yeah.
Any other recommendations, information, or encouragement for the listeners?
I guess anything I would say is, these properties out there for the use of our stakeholders, the general public. And as Roy mentioned, there's restrictions on use of those properties. We don't have the ability to go out and constantly monitor what's going on the properties. So we would ask those people who are out there using them to keep an eye on what's happening out there. There's a reason why it's foot access only, because we start having people driving all over them. We're going to have destroyed habitat, not to mention potentially ruining people's hunting experience if you're expecting to be able to walk in and somebody drives by in a truck. So if you've seen something like that go on, there's no need for you to have to, you don't have to be the enforcement officer, but let us know or call wildlife enforcement, because in most areas, wildlife enforcement, we've talked to them already. They know our stance on it. These are no vehicle access sites, and they'll deal with those people. Occasionally we've got cases where we show up at a site and someone is logging our site. Roy's dealt with a couple of those recently where people are cutting down trees. This is not public government land where you can get a permit to go cut down trees. This is in the end privately owned land by conservation groups for sure, and certainly on behalf of the public, but it's still privately owned land. So if you see things like that happening, please give us a call, help us out, help us to make sure these stay managed and stay good habitat for everybody, the wildlife and the people to use. So I don't know if you want to add anything into the fun you've had managing these sites, Roy?
Yeah, just on that note, respect other users of the site. We all want to go out and enjoy the sites. And if you bring something in, pack it out. Yeah, I think that's
good rules for anyone to follow anytime you're in the outdoors. I guess one message for hunters is be proud of the fact that you are a hunter. Your license fees fund some very important work being done in Alberta. The Alberta Conservation Association has multiple programs and different directions that they go and spend those monies on to help the wildlife, to ensure the habitat, and to encourage and promote and ensure there are places to hunt in the future. So it all ties together. It's one big spider web, and we're all part of it. And I'm glad I'm part of it and can provide this information through Harvest Your Own. Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Hunters do have to be proud of what's happening. It is, without the hunters and anglers, we wouldn't have these habitats or the wildlife that are on them.
So thanks for joining us today, and download that Discover Guide or go online and order one. It'll be in the mail to you within the week. We hope to inspire people to reconnect with nature and appreciate where your food comes from by harvesting your own. For more information on getting started or to learn specifics about the Field to Fork experience, visit harvestyourown.ca and follow on Facebook and Instagram. Check back often for new material, recipes, and videos that are posted regularly. Please subscribe to Harvest Your Own podcast and take the time to rate and review the show to help us build a dedicated core of passionate hunters as our regular audience. Until next time, embrace the outdoors and all it has to offer. Thanks for joining us.